Marcus Cole stood at the edge of the massive crater and looked down at the ruins of Artemis Station. His heart beating fast as he saw the broken domes and twisted metal towers that rose from the gray dust like the bones of some ancient beast. He had traveled alone for 3 weeks to reach this place, and now that he was here, he felt a strange mix of excitement and fear running through his body like electricity. The year was 2347, and no human had set foot on this abandoned moon colony for 40 long years. Not since the Great Exodus, when the resource wars forced everyone back to Earth and left behind everything they had built among the stars. Marcus was not a soldier or a scientist or any kind of official explorer. No, he was just a salvager. A man who made his living by searching through the ruins of humanity's failed dreams and selling whatever useful technology he could find to the highest bidder in the crowded markets of Neo-Shanghai. He adjusted his helmet and checked his oxygen levels one more time before he began his descent into the crater, his boots sending up small clouds of lunar dust with each careful step he took down the steep slope. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dead colony and making the empty buildings look like they were reaching out toward him with dark fingers. When he finally reached the main airlock of the central habitat dome, Marcus had to use his cutting torch to break through the outer seal that had been welded, shut decades ago by the last people to leave this place. The metal screamed as it gave way, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence of the moon, and Marcus felt his hands shaking slightly as he pulled the heavy door open and stepped inside. Emergency lights flickered to life as his movement triggered ancient sensors that still somehow worked after all these years, and the red glow made everything look like it was covered in blood. He walked slowly through the entrance corridor, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness and revealing walls covered with old posters and notices that had turned yellow with age. One poster caught his eye, and he stopped to read the faded words that said, Artemis Station Family Day, June 15, 2298, everyone. Welcome, with a picture of smiling children and their parents gathered around a birthday cake. Where were those children now? Marcus wondered. Were they old people living on Earth with grandchildren of their own? Or had the resource wars taken them like it had taken so many others? He shook off the sad thoughts and continued deeper into the station, passing through the mess hall where overturned tables and scattered trays told the story of a hasty evacuation that had left no time for cleaning up. Personal items lay everywhere, abandoned in the rush to escape. A child's stuffed animal sitting in a corner. A coffee mug with someone's name written on it. A family photograph that showed a young couple holding a baby and smiling at the camera. Marcus had seen many abandoned places in his years as a salvager, but something about this one felt different, heavier somehow. Like the ghosts of the people who had lived here were still watching from the shadows. He made his way to the main control room and tried to access the station's computer systems, hoping to find some useful data or maybe a map that would show him where the valuable equipment was stored. The screens came to life with a soft hum, displaying information that was 40 years out of date, but still readable if he squinted hard enough at the flickering displays. As he searched through the old files, Marcus noticed something strange in the station layout that the official records had never mentioned. A sublevel beneath the main colony that was marked with a red warning symbol and the words, Classified Level 5 Access Required. His curiosity burned like fire in his chest as he wondered what could be so important that it needed to be hidden even from the regular station personnel. He downloaded everything he could find onto his portable drive and then began searching for the entrance to this mysterious sublevel, checking every corridor and every room for some kind of hidden door or secret passage. It took him almost 2 hours of searching before he finally found it, a blast door hidden behind a fake wall panel in the maintenance section, so well concealed that you would never know it was there unless you were looking for it. The door was covered with strange symbols that Marcus had never seen before, Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move when he looked at them from different angles, almost like they were alive. He ran his fingers over the alien markings and felt a shiver run down his spine as he realized that these symbols were not made by human hands. No, they were something else entirely, something older and stranger than anything he had ever encountered. But the door itself had been modified with human technology. A standard electronic lock that Marcus knew he could break with the right tools and enough patience. He set up his equipment and got to work, his mind racing with questions about what could possibly be waiting for him on the other side of this door. What had the people of Artemis Station found buried beneath the lunar surface? And why had they kept it such a closely guarded secret? The lock finally gave way with a satisfying click, and Marcus grabbed the handle and pulled with all his strength until the heavy blast door slowly swung open. A rush of stale air hit his face, and his flashlight beam disappeared into a darkness so complete that it seemed to swallow the light itself. He stood there for a long moment, his heart pounding in his chest, knowing that once he stepped through this door, nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Marcus Cole took a deep breath, reminded himself that he had survived worse situations than this, and walked forward into the unknown with his head held high and his fear pushed down deep where it could not stop him. The darkness closed around him like a living thing, and somewhere far below, something that had been sleeping for a very long time began to wake up. Marcus descended the metal staircase that led down into the sublevel, each step echoing in the darkness like a drumbeat, announcing his arrival to whatever waited below. The air grew colder as he went deeper, and frost began to form on the walls around him, glittering in his flashlight beam like tiny diamonds scattered across the gray stone. He counted 300 steps before he finally reached the bottom, and when his feet touched the floor of the hidden chamber, his flashlight revealed something that made him stop breathing for several long seconds. A hangar stretched out before him, so vast and so impossible that his mind struggled to accept what his eyes were seeing. The ceiling rose at least 200 meters above his head, carved directly into the bedrock of the moon itself, and the walls were covered with the same strange geometric patterns he had seen on the blast door above. But all of this was nothing compared to what sat in the center of the hangar, resting on massive support struts like a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. A ship, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen or even imagined, filled the enormous space with its presence. The vessel was not built the way human ships were built. No, its hull was smooth and flowing, with curves and angles that seemed to shift depending on where you stood, as if the whole thing had been grown from a single piece of some unknown material rather than welded together from metal plates. Yet human hands had clearly touched this alien craft, and Marcus could see the evidence everywhere he looked. Steel panels bolted over damaged sections, cables running from human generators into ports that had been cut into the hull, and scaffolding surrounding the entire ship like a metal skeleton. He walked closer, his boots echoing in the silence, and that was when he saw the words painted on the side of the vessel in faded white letters that spelled out UNS Prometheus. UNS meant United Nations Spacecraft, Marcus knew, which meant that at some point, the governments of Earth had claimed this alien ship as their own and given it a human name. But why had nobody ever heard about this? Why was there no record of humanity discovering alien technology on the moon? Marcus searched the hangar until he found a control room built into the wall, filled with old computer terminals and filing cabinets stuffed with paper documents that had turned yellow and brittle with age. He spent hours going through everything, reading reports and watching video logs left behind by the scientists, who had worked here in secret for years before the evacuation. The story they told was almost too incredible to believe. In 2298, a team of miners drilling beneath the lunar surface had accidentally broken through into this very hangar. discovering the alien vessel that had been buried here for at least 50,000 years. The United Nations Space Command had immediately classified the discovery at the highest level and sent their best scientists to study the ship and learn its secrets. There, Elena Vasquez had led the research team, a brilliant woman with dark hair and fierce eyes who appeared in video after video, her excitement growing with each new discovery they made. The ship's technology was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had ever created, and the scientists worked day and night to understand how it functioned and what it was designed to do. They learned that the vessel was not just a spacecraft, but something far more important. It was a seed ship, left behind by an ancient species that the researchers came to call the architects. These architects had traveled the galaxy millions of years ago, planting the building blocks of life on countless worlds and leaving behind gifts of technology for any species that managed to evolve and reach the stars. The Prometheus was one of these gifts, a treasure chest filled with knowledge and power that could change the course of human history forever. But then the resource wars began on Earth, and everything fell apart. Governments turned against each other, fighting over the last scraps of oil and fresh water and farmable land, and the funding for space programs dried up almost overnight. The order came to evacuate all lunar colonies and bring everyone back to Earth, and the scientists of Artemis Station were told to abandon their work and leave the Prometheus behind. Marcus watched the final video log with his heart aching in his chest as Dr. Vasquez spoke directly to the camera, her eyes red from crying and her voice shaking with emotion. "They are telling us to leave," she said, "but I cannot abandon this ship. Not after everything we have learned, not when we are so close to unlocking its greatest secrets." The video ended there, and Marcus could find no record of what had happened to Dr. Vasquez after that moment. Had she obeyed the evacuation order and returned to Earth with everyone else? Or had she stayed behind and died alone in this frozen tomb beneath the moon? Marcus walked back into the hangar and approached the Prometheus, running his hand along the smooth hull and feeling a strange warmth beneath his fingers, as if the ship still held some spark of life after all these millennia. He found an airlock that the human scientists had installed and managed to get it open with his salvage tools, stepping inside the alien vessel with his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The interior was dark but not dead, and as Marcus moved through the curved corridors, soft lights began to glow along the walls, responding to his presence like the ship was welcoming him home. He followed the lights deeper and deeper into the vessel until he reached what could only be the command chamber, a circular room with a high dome ceiling covered in stars that slowly rotated overhead. And there, in the center of the room, he found what remained of Dr. Elena Vasquez. Not her body, no, but something far stranger, a pillar of crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, connected to the ship's systems by hundreds of cables that spread out across the floor like the roots of some great tree. Marcus stared at the crystal, not understanding what he was seeing, until a voice suddenly filled the chamber, soft and tired, but unmistakably human. "Hello," the voice said. "I have been waiting for you, or for someone like you, for a very long time, and I am so very glad that you are finally here." Marcus fell backward in shock, his flashlight clattering to the floor as he tried to understand what was happening. "Who are you?" he shouted into the darkness. "What is this place? What is going on?" The blue light in the crystal grew brighter, and the voice spoke again with a warmth that made Marcus think of his grandmother, telling stories by the fire on cold winter nights. "My name is Elena Vasquez," the voice said. "I have a story to tell you that will change everything you think you know about humanity and our place among the stars." Marcus sat on the cold floor of the command chamber, his mind spinning like a ship caught in a storm as he tried to understand what Elena Vasquez was telling him. She had uploaded herself into the ship, she explained, using experimental technology that her team had discovered in the Prometheus's memory banks. When the evacuation order came 40 years ago, Elena had refused to leave, knowing that if she abandoned the ship now, it might be centuries before anyone returned, and by then all their work would be lost. So she had made a choice that no human being had ever made before. She had transferred her consciousness, her memories, her very soul into the alien computer systems that controlled the Prometheus. It was not an easy decision. Elena's voice echoed through the chamber. And there were many times in the early years when I thought I had made a terrible mistake and wished that I had simply died like a normal human being. But she had survived, existing as a digital ghost inside the ancient alien ship, keeping its systems running and waiting for the day when humanity would finally return to claim their inheritance. "Why did you stay?" Marcus asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "What could possibly be worth giving up your life, your body, everything that makes you human?" The lights in the chamber grew brighter, and the stars on the domed ceiling began to move faster, forming patterns and shapes that Marcus slowly realized were maps of distant galaxies. "Let me show you," Elena said. "Let me show you what the architects left for us and why it matters more than anything else in the universe." Images began to appear in the air around Marcus, holographic projections that showed him wonders beyond anything he had ever imagined. He saw the architects themselves, tall beings with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed with inner light, walking through cities that floated among the clouds of gas-giant planets. He saw their ships, thousands of them, spreading out across the galaxy like seeds blown on a cosmic wind, each one carrying the gift of life to barren worlds that would one day bloom with forests and oceans and thinking creatures. He saw Earth as it had been millions of years ago, a young planet covered with simple bacteria, receiving the touch of architect technology that would eventually lead to the evolution of humans. "They created us," Marcus breathed, understanding flooding through him like a river breaking through a dam. "The architects are the reason humanity exists." "Not created," Elena corrected gently, "but guided, nurtured, given a chance to grow and reach our full potential, just like countless other species across millions of worlds." She showed him the network of seed ships hidden throughout the solar system, one buried beneath the red sands of Mars, another sleeping in the frozen oceans of Europa, more waiting on Titan and Enceladus and moons that humans had not yet visited. Each ship contained technology and knowledge that could solve every problem humanity faced, clean energy that could power entire civilizations, medical science that could cure every disease, engines that could carry humans to other stars in days instead of centuries. "This is our inheritance," Elena said, "the gift that the architects left for us, waiting for the day when we would be ready to claim it." But then her voice grew darker, and the beautiful images faded away, replaced by something that made Marcus's blood run cold. He saw civilizations burning, entire planets consumed by fire, species that had flourished for millions of years reduced to ash and memory in the blink of an eye. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, jumping to his feet. "What am I looking at?" "The silence," Elena replied, and even her digital voice seemed to tremble with fear. "The thing that the architects spent their entire existence trying to understand and defeat. The shadow that hunts any species that grows too powerful too quickly." She explained that the architects had discovered the silence near the end of their civilization, a force or entity or something beyond human comprehension that seemed to exist only to destroy. Whenever a species reached a certain level of technological advancement, the silence would come for them, appearing without warning and erasing them from existence so completely that not even ruins remained. The architects had fought against the silence with all their power and all their wisdom, but in the end, even they had fallen. Their great civilization reduced to nothing but the seed ships they had scattered across the galaxy. "They left us a warning," Elena said, "encoded in every ship and every piece of technology they gave us. A message that took me decades to fully translate and understand." The stars on the ceiling rearranged themselves into words, alien symbols that slowly transformed into English letters as Elena translated them. To those who find this vessel, you have proven your worth by surviving long enough to reach the stars. But survival is not enough. The silence hunts those who hide, those who cower, those who advance without unity. Only a species that faces the void together, not as nations, not as factions, but as one, can hope to endure. Marcus read the words over and over, feeling their weight settle onto his shoulders like a mountain made of responsibility. The resource wars, he said slowly. Humanity spent 100 years fighting each other over scraps while this ship sat here waiting for us. Yes, Elena agreed. And now the silence is coming. I can feel it in the data streams that flow through this ship. Something ancient and terrible is turning its attention toward this part of the galaxy. And if humanity is not ready, if we are still divided and fighting among ourselves, we will be destroyed just like all the others. Marcus walked to the center of the chamber and stood beneath the rotating stars, his jaw set with determination and his hands clenched into fists. Then we have to warn them, he said. We have to take this information back to Earth and make them understand what is at stake. That is why I waited, Elena replied, and for the first time Marcus heard something like hope in her tired digital voice. I knew that eventually someone would come. Someone brave enough and stubborn enough to carry this message back to our people. She paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more personal. I chose to believe in humanity, Marcus, even when we were at our worst. Even when we were killing each other over oil and water and patches of dirt. I believed that someday we would remember who we truly are and reach for the stars again. Marcus looked up at the crystal pillar that contained what remained of Elena Vasquez, a woman who had given up everything to protect humanity's future, and he felt tears forming in his eyes. How do we start? He asked. How do we wake up a world that has forgotten how to dream? Elena's light pulsed with warmth, and Marcus could have sworn he heard her smile. We start by getting me out of here, she said. My consciousness can be transferred to your ship's computer, and together we can bring the truth to Earth. Marcus nodded and began to work, knowing that the hardest part of his journey was still ahead, but also knowing that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The transfer took 12 hours, and Marcus stayed awake through all of it, watching as Elena's consciousness flowed from the crystal pillar into the small portable computer he had brought from his ship. Lines of code scrolled across his screen faster than his eyes could follow, each one carrying a piece of who Elena was. Her memories, her knowledge, her personality, her hopes, and her fears. When it was finally done, the crystal pillar went dark for the first time in 40 years, and Elena's voice emerged from the speakers of his portable unit, sounding tired but triumphant. It worked, she said. I am free of that prison at last, though I must admit I will miss being connected to something so vast and so beautiful. Marcus looked around the command chamber one last time, knowing that he was leaving behind one of the greatest discoveries in human history, but also knowing that the information he carried was worth more than any physical treasure. Will the Prometheus still be here when we come back? He asked. Can we trust that nobody else will find it? The ship will sleep until we return, Elena assured him. I have locked its systems with codes that only I know. And without power from the main reactor, it will be invisible to any scanners. They made their way back through the ship and up the long staircase, and Marcus felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier with every step he took. When he emerged from the sublevel and sealed the blast door behind him, he stood in the abandoned colony for a long moment, looking at the empty corridors and the scattered belongings of people who had lived and worked and dreamed in this place so many years ago. They were good people, Elena said softly, reading his thoughts. My colleagues, my friends. They deserve better than to have their life's work forgotten and buried. We will make sure they are remembered, Marcus promised. When this is over, The whole world will know what the scientists of Artemis Station accomplished. He made his way back to his small salvage ship, the vessel that had carried him across the void from Earth to the Moon on a journey he had expected to be routine. How could he have known when he left that he would return carrying the fate of humanity in his hands? The trip back to Earth would take 3 weeks, and Marcus used that time to prepare himself for what lay ahead. Elena shared everything she knew about the architects and the Silence, teaching him the history of a galactic civilization that had risen and fallen millions of years before humans even existed. She showed him the technical data from the Prometheus, explaining in simple terms how the alien technology worked and what it could do for humanity if they learned to use it properly. Free energy from the fabric of space itself, she said. Engines that fold distance like paper. Medical technology that can repair any injury and cure any disease. Weapons that could protect us from anything the universe might throw at us. But she also showed him the darker knowledge, the warnings and the fears that the architects had recorded in their final days. The Silence was not just a natural disaster or a random cosmic event. It was something purposeful. Something that seemed to actively hunt civilizations that reached a certain level of power. Some architect scientists have believed the Silence was a weapon created by an even older civilization, a way to prevent any species from becoming too powerful. Others thought it was a natural force, like gravity or time, that existed to maintain some kind of cosmic balance. And a few, the ones whose theories Elena found most disturbing, believed the Silence was alive, a vast intelligence that fed on the energy of dying civilizations and grew stronger with each one it consumed. We do not know which theory is correct, Elena admitted. And perhaps it does not matter. What matters is that the Silence is real and it is coming. And if humanity is not united when it arrives, we will share the fate of every other species that has faced it alone. Marcus spent hours staring out the window of his ship at the stars, thinking about everything he had learned and everything he had to do. He was just one man, a salvager with no political power and no special connections. How was he supposed to convince the governments of Earth to set aside their differences and work together? The resource wars had ended decades ago, but the world was still divided into factions and alliances that viewed each other with suspicion and fear. The United Earth Council existed, but it was weak, more of a talking shop than a real government, with no power to force nations to cooperate. They will not believe me, Marcus said one night, his voice heavy with doubt. They will think I am crazy or lying or trying to manipulate them for some kind of personal gain. Perhaps, Elena agreed, but you have something that no one can argue with. You have proof. You have data from an alien civilization. You have technology that no human could have created, and most importantly, you have me. She reminded him that her upload process had been documented, that there were records in the Artemis Station database that proved who she was and what she had done. I was one of the most respected scientists in my field, she said. My colleagues on Earth will remember me. And when they analyze this technology and see that it matches nothing in human science, they will have to accept that everything we are telling them is true. Marcus nodded slowly, feeling his confidence begin to return as he realized that he was not as alone as he had thought. What about the other ships? He asked. The ones hidden on Mars and Europa and all the other moons. Can we wake them up from here? Not wake them up, Elena replied, but I can send a signal from your communication system that will cause them to broadcast their locations, so that anyone with the right equipment will be able to find them. Marcus made his decision. When they reached Earth, they would broadcast everything. The data from the Prometheus, the warnings from the architects, the locations of the other seed ships, all of it. They would not try to control this information or use it for personal gain. They would give it freely to all of humanity and let the people of Earth decide what to do with it. This is the only way, Marcus said firmly. If we try to keep this secret or use it as a bargaining chip, We will be no better than the governments that buried the Prometheus in the first place." "I agree," Elena said, and Marcus could hear the pride in her digital voice. "The architects left this gift for all of humanity, not for any single nation or group, and that is how it must remain." As the blue and green sphere of Earth grew larger in his window, Marcus Cole straightened his shoulders and prepared to face whatever challenges awaited him. He was just one man, but he carried the hopes of an ancient civilization and the future of his own species, and he would not let either of them down. Marcus Cole stood at the podium of the United Earth Council chamber, facing the most powerful people on the planet as cameras broadcast his words to every screen on every continent. 6 months had passed since he first sent his message from orbit. 6 months of chaos and doubt and arguments that sometimes seemed like they would tear the world apart. At first, just as he had feared, most people thought he was insane, a delusional salvager who had spent too much time alone in space and had lost his grip on reality. The governments of Earth had seized his ship and taken Elena's portable computer, subjecting both to every test their scientists could imagine. But the data was real. The technology was beyond anything humans could create, and Elena herself had convinced her former colleagues that she was exactly who she claimed to be. News of the discovery had spread across the world like wildfire, and people had reacted in ways that ranged from celebration to terror. Some saw the architect technology as salvation, the answer to every problem humanity faced, a gift from the stars that would lift them into a golden age of peace and plenty. Others feared it, warned that meddling with alien science would bring disaster, that humans should destroy the ships and pretend none of this had ever happened. And then there were those who wanted to control it, powerful nations that sent warships to the moon to try to claim the Prometheus for themselves. Those early months had been the hardest of Marcus's life, and there were times when he thought he had failed, that humanity was too broken and too foolish to accept the gift they had been given. But then something remarkable had happened, something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. The people had risen up, not with weapons or violence, but with voices that demanded to be heard. Ordinary men and women every country on Earth had taken to the streets, flooding the networks with messages of hope and unity, telling their leaders that this was the moment they had been waiting for, the chance to finally become something greater than they had ever been. Children held up signs that said, "We want the stars," and grandparents who remembered the first moon landing wept with joy at the thought that humanity might finally finish what they had started so long ago. The pressure had been overwhelming, and one by one, the governments of Earth had agreed to come together and discuss the future. And now Marcus stood before them all, a salvager addressing presidents and prime ministers and generals, ready to deliver the final argument that would determine the fate of his species. "You have all seen the evidence," he said, his voice steady and strong. "You know that the architects were real, that they left us these ships as a gift, and that something called the Silence is coming to test whether we are worthy of surviving." He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from nations that had been enemies for generations. "I know what you are thinking. You are thinking about borders and resources and old grudges that go back centuries. You are thinking about how to use this technology to gain an advantage over your rivals." Some of the delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and Marcus knew he had hit close to the truth. "But let me tell you what I learned on the moon, in that ancient ship buried beneath the dust. Let me tell you what the architects understood after millions of years of watching civilizations rise and fall." He activated the holographic display behind him, showing the message that Elena had translated, the words that the architects had left for whoever might find their gifts. "Only a species that faces the void together, not as nations, not as factions, but as one, can hope to endure." The words hung in the air, glowing with soft light, and Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he spoke his final argument. The architects watched 1,000 species destroy themselves before the silence could even arrive. They saw civilizations with technology we cannot imagine tear each other apart over petty differences and ancient hatreds. He stepped forward, his hands gripping the podium, his heart burning with passion. But they left these ships for us anyway. Do you understand what that means? They saw something in humanity that made them believe we could be different. That we could be the ones stubborn enough and brave enough to look into the darkness and refuse to give up. He pointed at the display, at the map showing the locations of seed ships scattered throughout the solar system. 7 ships are out there waiting for us, each one containing enough technology to change everything. But they will only work if we claim them together. If we finally become the species that the architects believed we could be. Marcus stepped back from the podium and took a deep breath. I am just a salvager. I have no army and no political power. But I have seen what humanity is capable of when we work together. I have read the records of Artemis Station and watched scientists from 20 different countries set aside their differences to unlock secrets that had been buried for 50,000 years. He spread his arms wide, embracing the entire chamber. We have been divided for so long that we have forgotten what we can accomplish when we stand side by side. But the architects remembered, and they left us one final gift, the chance to prove them right. The chamber was silent for a long moment, and Marcus could feel the weight of history pressing down on everyone present. Then the delegate from China stood up, followed by the delegate from America, then Russia, then Brazil, then nation after nation, until the entire chamber was on its feet. The vote was unanimous. Within a year, the first united human fleet left Earth orbit, heading for the moon to reclaim the Prometheus. Within 5 years, all 7 seed ships had been recovered and restored. Within a decade, humanity had established colonies on Mars and Europa and Titan, had cured diseases that had plagued them for centuries, and had built engines that could carry them to other stars. And when the silence finally came, drifting toward the solar system like a shadow made of hunger and death, they found something that no other species had ever shown them. They found humanity standing together, united for the first time in their history, with 7 ancient ships glowing with power and 7 billion voices raised in defiance. Marcus Cole, now old and gray, but still standing straight and proud, watched from the bridge of the Prometheus as the first fleet moved to intercept the darkness. They asked why we kept reaching for the stars, he said softly, repeating words that would one day be carved into monuments across 100 worlds. Even when the stars burned us, we never had an answer, we just kept reaching. Beside him, Elena's voice emerged from the ship's speakers, warm with love and pride. And now we know why, she said, because reaching is what makes us human. The fleet engaged its engines and flew forward into the unknown, carrying the hopes of an ancient civilization and the stubborn courage of a species that had never learned how to give up. The silence was waiting, but so was humanity. And humanity always comes back.